Module 1. Curriculum is content, of course. That's where you teach math, science, social studies, ELA, etc. But it's also the totality of learning experiences provided to students so that they can attain general skills and knowledge at a variety of learning levels. What that means is it's also about getting along, organization, problem solving, personality conflicts, how to handle those, field trips. So, curriculum is everything. When we're talking about curriculum in this course, it is your state standards. It is, for example, you need to teach the parts of the water cycle, but you also have to be knowledgeable and aware of what your students are going through, some issues that they might be having. It might be certain times of the year where they're going through some things, at the end of the school year, right before Christmas break or something. It's also being sensitive to that. That's why I chose the textbook, The Art and Science of Teaching, because teaching is a science. There's methods for you to use to teach your students, there's concrete content, but also it's also an art. It's also looking at all of their experiences. Um, So looking at curriculum as a whole. A couple of years ago, House Bill 5 was started, of course, in Texas. And what that did is that required school districts to offer endorsement areas to their high school students. And my oldest son was one of the first years, he's now going to be a senior, and he was one of the first years that this was implemented. And at the time, it started in seventh grade. So at that time, students in seventh grade, so we're looking at a 13-year-old boy, had to decide what career, what did he want to be when he grew up. And I think it's kind of funny because they had to kind of sign and fill out and I guess um, how do I want to say it, like declare their endorsement area in seventh grade, and they had to, sign their name. And it was funny because we talked about, first of all, he's a 13-year-old boy, and second of all, he doesn't even know how to sign his name because they don't teach cursive anymore. So it's kind of funny how it started, but it really is now, 4 years into it or 5 years into it, it really is a wonderful thing for high schools to provide for their students. House Bill 5 provided 5 endorsement areas, and you can see right here STEM, business and industry, public services, arts and humanities, and multidisciplinary studies. And what they required of school districts is school districts chose which of the 5 they are going to provide their students in their district. This is actually this what you see on the screen is actually from my children in Montgomery ISD. The school district offers all 5 of them. School districts are not required to. What they are required to offer is multidisciplinary studies, which means I'm not quite sure what I want to do, and that's pretty much um, what they've been doing for many years with um, high school pathways, which would be, take a art and take a science, take an art, take a health, take a, a speech, that kind of thing. But I will tell you that what this House Bill 5 allows is both of my children in high school, to take courses in what it was designed for was for students to take courses in high school to figure out if they liked that before they went off either into career or college and wasted time and money. A lot of these endorsement areas, students can leave high school having certain certifications like HVAC certification, welding right here, culinary arts, automotive technology. Um, I think in the nursing pathway, they could come out as a CNA, certified nursing assistant, out of high school. So Hospital 5 was designed for students in high school to take some courses in these different endorsement areas and see, if that's for them. Um, so here are the 5 endorsement areas that my district, and these are 5 are constant with House Bill 5. What isn't constant is what's on the right. This is what my district has decided the courses they wanted to provide students in relation to STEM, or these are the courses that they want students to be able to take with business and industry endorsements. So here's what I equate it to. This, you have five choices of a major, and this would kind of be like a minor. So for my oldest, he's automatically STEM because he took advanced math courses starting in junior high. But he also took, let's see if he took a class, he took a computer science class in I can't see it for right now. I guess it would be business and industry. No, I guess it would be right here, computer science. He took a computer science class as well, figured out it wasn't for him. He also took, I think, two classes in agriculture, which he did enjoy, but he got his boater certification, safety certification. They talked about hunting, so he got his hunter safety um, certification. They talked a lot about hunting and fishing stuff, which he's interested in, and he did a little bit of welding in that class as well. He also took next year he's taking a class in the health sciences and medical occupation because he might want to be an EMT. But for his main endorsement, he chose public services, which is law enforcement. So he took several years of law enforcement, and that provided him an opportunity to see court systems in action. I think he took three classes in the legal, like court systems, was able to go to uh, actual court hearings and listen, had mock trials. So he learned a lot about laws and court systems, and then he took a couple of courses specifically with law enforcement. So learned about SWAT and learned about the military um, areas of law enforcement, provided a lot of experiences there. Now, my daughter will probably do the education route. So instead of taking, um, so in high school, she'll take, several courses on teaching and be ready to figure out, hey, this is for me or this is not for me. She's also interested in social work as well, so she's going to be taking some psychology and sociology type courses there. But that's what this endorsement pathway, House Bill 5, allows. And then, of course, you still have your graduating with, as we used to call it, honors, which is your distinguished achievement as well. So every student from now on in high school will graduate with an endorsement area. Now, the way that it's designed is multidisciplinary studies. You can start off that way, but by the end, you need to have chosen a pathway. And it's not directly necessarily 4 full years of it. You can double up, but it allows you opportunities to figure out, hey, if you're interested in this. This is the course catalog for my kids in their high school. And actually, it's actually, this is about 2 years old, so it's different. So if you look at it, public service, that was an endorsement option. And if you wanted to be, your minor wanted to be health science, then these are the types of courses you could take. Principles of health science theory, anatomy and physiology, pharmacology, pathophysiology, forensic science, which my son took. He took forensic science in the law enforcement area here. And then for 2 years, you're in the clinics and you can come out with, as a pharmacy tech, certified as a pharmacy tech, dual credit EMT. So this is my son, so he took law and security, law enforcement, forensic science, court systems, a whole bunch of stuff here. And they do have the arts as well. Um, this is kind of interesting. In when he was 13, he thought maybe he wanted to be in engineering, so he started off with STEM major with engineering minor, and we looked at this and it was like, okay, civil engineering he would take 1 year, aerospace engineering he would take 1 year. We're like, maybe that might be a little too tough. But um, I encourage you to look around the district that you're working in. Usually that information is posted on the high school website. Figure out of the five choices, what your high school and your district offers, which one of these five, which ones. And so these would be kind of like what we call majors, and these would be kind of like minors, I guess you could say. I like this quote. The single greatest determinant of learning is not economic factors or funding levels, it is instruction. I truly believe that. I know a lot of people have said, well, that's so, that it's unequal how certain districts have more money than others, and this is a poorer district. And then some would say, well, yeah, but you provided with more funds through title funding and all of that. I I think that's true and it's valid, but it all comes down to instruction. Districts can have the most resources for their teachers, but if their teachers don't know how to teach and don't have a passion for teaching, then the students aren't going to learn. So even going back with this is great, and my district is wonderful, and it provides all these great coursework for the students. But if these teachers can't teach these courses with passion and encourage and want to encourage their or plant seeds in their students' minds about being these careers, the careers will be shut down. The students will say, "Well, I didn't like that you know instructor who taught that class, so I don't want to do engineering anymore." It really depends on the instruction, and the instruction is what we're going to talk about in this class. And teachers need to understand your standards and understand what you need to teach in order for the instruction to come. So, talking about the types of curriculum, there's two major types that we're going to talk about. Explicit curriculum, that's your state and district standards. Those are your TEKS. So the state of Texas says if you're teaching third grade math, here are the standards. These are the standards that you must teach your students. Well, the good districts take those standards and they create scope and sequences. They create outlines for students, for teachers. They say, okay, state of Texas says you have these 30 standards to teach this year. Here's what you're going to do. The first 6 weeks, you're going to teach these standards. And the second 6 weeks, you're going to teach these standards. And then the good school districts have scope and sequence rather than just saying, oh, state of Texas says teach all this, so do it whenever you want to do it. And then the really good districts have curriculum guides that go along with the scope and sequence. So they say, okay, here's what the state of Texas wants you to teach. Here's what we're telling you to teach the first 6 weeks. And here are the resources. Um, Here are the lesson plans. Here are the lesson guidelines. Here are the assessments. Here's the resources for you to teach that information. So when you are looking for your teaching job, you really want to make sure that you're interviewing the district as well and the school as well. I hear a lot of research done on teacher burnout. I don't think, in my experience, that it's the teachers that are burning out because they're just tired of this. And a lot of people say, well, the parents, yeah, the parents are, can get on your nerves at times, but it's you're not provided the resources. You're not provided with standards and scope and sequence and the curriculum and the support and the mentoring and such. So when you're looking for your first real teaching job, you want to make sure you're interviewing these schools districts as well. Then the other kind is your tested curriculum. That's what we all know. We've all heard of the STAR test. And in one of the modules, I'll go over the STAR test because it really is not a scary thing. If you're teaching your state standards, the STAR test is not scary at all. It's been blown out of proportion by media as well as schools that are low performing because they make such a strong emphasis on teaching to the test when the test is your state standard. So you should be teaching to the test all year long, and then the test that comes at the end should be no big deal. But another kind of curriculum is our TPRI. That's for our younger grades, or DIBELS. That's for our younger grades. These are for grades K through 2. This is a reading assessment. We don't hear about it because it's not in the news. It's not a no pass, no promote type high stakes testing, but you also do have some state required testing in reading. And then another type of tested curriculum is your curriculum-based assessments. These would go with your curriculum guides. So this is all assessments based on what your district is telling you to teach. So some key terms that we're going to talk about is instructional planning. That's the process by which a teacher decides how best to select and organize learning for student success. That is usually, a lot of times when people hear the word planning, they say, oh, my planning period's third period. Well, yes, your planning period is third period, but the process is actually where the teacher sits down and says, okay, my scope and sequence says I need to teach this TEKS. Here's what I know from my students. They have some good foundation in the prerequisite skills for this topic. So let's see, how do I want to design my lesson? Well, they're really, it's right before Christmas and it's really hard to keep their attention. So I really want to do a lot of hands-on activities with them. So the whole idea of instructional planning is a huge process. It is not writing the actual writing of the lesson plan. It's thinking about everything, thinking about your students, thinking about the content, thinking about your resources, thinking about your personal feeling with that standard. If it's a standard that's really not one of your favorites or not really one of your strengths, then you're really going to need to sell it um, as much as you can to the students. And so what could you do methods wise and strategies wise to make sure the students understand that content? Alignment, the extent to which what is taught and tested coincides with state standards. We're going to talk in, I guess, the third module, when your stars align. Alignment, you start with your standard. The students will know the parts of the water cycle. And then you go to your end. How am I going to assess that? And then your lessons need to build that knowledge so they're successful at the end. That is alignment. To the extent that what you teach and what's tested is your state standard. So when I talk about in these upcoming modules, know your lane, I think that's the next module, knowing your lane, that means every single word in the TEK is so important because that's what is required um, of your students to do. And then TEKS are your Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. Objectives are your learning outcomes. Strategy is a mental process a student uses to understand information. So you're teaching your content and teaching them strategies so that when they're working on something with content, they're able to pull some of these strategies you've taught them in the past to figure out, hey, how does this new information fit with the old information? How do I synthesize this information? An activity is actually creating a product to support a learning. That's your actual activity, what you're going to do. And we're going to talk about that in a second. And then lesson plan, that's your framework for teaching. Years ago, lesson planning used to be, we used to have these big old lesson plan books, and there was just a little box, and it was basically water cycle was all you would put in that. That's not a lesson plan. That's a topic sentence, kind of, or topic. It's not even a sentence. A lesson plan should be written in depth. When you write your lesson plan, it's a minimum of 2 pages. It's your framework for teaching. What am I required to teach them? How is this going to look an objective? How am I going to assess this? How am I going to introduce this activity? How am I going to teach this activity? How am I going to close this activity? The whole thing is your lesson plan framework. So in chapter first, hopefully by now you should have. If you have not stopped, sorry, if you have not read chapter 1, you want to stop this video and read chapter 1. So chapter 1 talked about the art and science of teaching. What does that mean? Well, it's research supported. Research will never identify instructional strategies that will work for every student, but it gives you a tool bag to pull from. So knowledge of instructional strategies, plus knowing your content, plus knowing the individual student needs at particular times is effective teaching. And effective teaching is an art. That's where you get the art and the science. So chapter 1 talked about learning goals versus activities. And sometimes, well, a lot of times teachers get very confused on them. They say, okay, well, I'm going to write my lesson plan and the students are going to do this worksheet or the students are going to create this 3D model. Well, you didn't set your learning goal for them. That's the activity. So that would be called an activity plan, not a lesson plan. So we'll start with learning goals. Learning goals are also called your objectives, and they state what the students will know or be able to do. So the students will, and you need to look at the verb in order to know if it's an objective. Students will understand key aspects of the water cycle. Students will be able to multiply 2-digit numbers. And on the other side of that is the activities or assignments. Essentially, they're used to help students achieve those learning goals. So the students will be able to multiply 2-digit numbers, and how are they going to do that? Okay. So some of the activities that students could do is students will preview the chapter on the water cycle. That's not a goal, that's an actual activity. Students will compare and contrast the parts of the water cycle. So these activities represent something the student will do in order to help them learn the new information or skills from your learning goals or objectives. So in this figure, you have some examples. For example, in science, a learning goal would be the student will understand that the sun is the largest body in the solar system. Well, how are they going to do that? The activity would be they're going to watch a video. Or mathematics, the students will be able to solve equations with one variable. That's your goal. You want them to be able to solve equations with one variable. Well, how are they going to do that? The activity is students will practice solving 10 equations in cooperative groups. If you want to look at a couple more of these, you can pause the video and look at those. So, time to practice. Students will read chapter 10. Is that a learning goal or is that an activity? That's an activity. Students will time each other on multiplication facts. That's an activity or an assignment. Students will be able to use an ordered pair to plot a point on a graph. That's a learning goal or an objective. Students will understand the rules of capitalization and be able to correct mistakes. That's a learning goal. That's what you want them to be able to understand, be able to understand the rules of capitalization. And the last one, students will write the weather forecast information. That would be an activity. They're just going to do it. It doesn't talk about the knowledge that you're going to want them to have. So talking about lesson plans, what's the purpose of a lesson plan? It's to guide your instruction. It's to set it up so that you understand your path. Because if you have a path set, then the students will be able to follow it. What are the components of a lesson plan? Different districts require different um, looking lesson plans. Should they all be alike? No, it depends on your district. Sometimes they call them focus activities. Sometimes they call it introduction activity. What role do the TEKS play in shaping a lesson plan? They're the number they have the biggest role because a lesson plan must in the state of Texas revolve around a standard. Now, every day do you have to have a standard? Not necessarily, but every day you're building foundation for a standard. The state of Texas gives you plenty of TEKS for you to teach during the year, and so you're not going to be able to add too much extra information. What makes a lesson plan effective? Well, all the components. Make sure it's clear. There's a beginning, there's an end, and there's information in between. What lesson plan formats do districts use? Well, there's a couple. Some districts or a lot of districts use the 5E framework. So you have your basic information at the top, and then you'll have the 5E. So you'll start off with an engagement activity, and then exploration and explanation and elaboration and so forth. So you've got five E's here. And that's how you will design your framework, your lesson plan. Another one is Eduphoria. Eduphoria is a really good program. I really like the way that that is um, set up because it provides a way for you to do a couple of things. So right here in the center, Eduphoria has a lot of, they have a lesson planner builder, they have an assessment provider, and they have a whole bunch of stuff. But Eduphoria is great because it allows you to type your lesson plan information here. So here's a warm up. What's your warm up? And if you want to change the heading from warm up to introduction, you can change it and it'll change that terminology in your header for the rest of um, the lessons, materials, procedures, and evaluation. This district set it up this way, but you can change these headers to mean everything and to have everything. But what I like about this is see how the attachments, it has a paper clip. Here's a lot of these resources that are already pre-populated from the program, or your district can pre-populate. So if there's let's say a handout, like this one might be a handout on the water cycle, you just drag it and drop it here, and that's automatically in your lesson plan. You scroll down through it, maybe there's a video, then you'll embed the link there. At the top, you would write, instead of writing your actual, the TEK here, you could find the TEK here. And this is a district who has imported their scope and sequence. So it says this is science grade 5, first 6 weeks. Drop down the menu and you click on the TEK and it'll automatically put it here. So you do not have to type the standard out. And then what's awesome is you can share, this is kind of like Facebook. You share it with your friends, which you share it with your grade level, and they can see the lesson plan as you're building it. So they won't be having to wait for you to hand over the lesson plan all the time. You could print it, and then when you teach from it, you just bring it up, and oh, all the attachments are already there, so you don't have to look for the link to this or the handout to this or the Word document for this. Everything is already in there. Eduphoria is a great system. Another one years ago was C-Scope, and I think now it's called Texas, Texas Resource System or something like that. There was a big legal fight over it. Um, but C-Scope has a lot of good um, a lot of good resources. The problem is if you look at this, just this one lesson, look at all these handouts and transparencies the teachers need. And C-Scope is all electronic, so you have to print off and make a lot of these handouts and worksheets and resources for the students. But what I like about C-Scope here is they have like an alignment chart. So let's say you're a fourth grade math teacher and you're teaching TEK 4.1a. You can see this would be third grade over here on the left and fifth grade here in reference to place value. So you'll know, oh, my lane, and I'll talk a lot about my lane. My lane is just up through this number. Next year, they're going to go up to this number. So it kind of gives you a good view of, see, this is my lane right here. And like I mentioned, you're gonna go through in the next module talking more specifically about how to read your TEK standard and also looking at your lanes and what your responsibilities are.